Why can't your brain let go of one person, even when they hurt you, even when you know they were wrong for you, even when months have passed, and everyone around you keeps saying, just move on? So why do they still live in your mind? Why does one random song suddenly feel unbearable? Why do old messages feel impossible to delete? Why do you still imagine conversations that will probably never happen? And maybe the most uncomfortable question of all, what if this obsession has less to do with love and more to do with how your brain reacts to emotional uncertainty? Because sometimes the person you can't stop thinking about isn't the person you truly wanted. It's the person your mind never got closure from. You know the feeling. It's 1:43 in the morning. You told yourself you were done checking their profile, done replaying old memories, done wondering what they meant when they suddenly became distant, but somehow your fingers still open the app. You stare at the old pictures, read conversations you already memorized, and for some reason, your brain keeps asking the same exhausting question. What happened? Or worse, what if I had done something differently? Maybe you imagine fake conversations in the shower. Maybe you hear a song in a coffee shop and suddenly they're everywhere again. Maybe someone says a phrase they used to say and your chest sinks without warning. The worst part? You don't even want to think about them anymore, but your brain keeps bringing them back like an unwanted movie scene. And this is where things get strange because psychology says this might not actually be about love, at least not the kind of love people usually talk about. There's something called limerence, a term introduced by psychologist Dr. Dorothy Tenoff. And if you've ever felt emotionally trapped inside thoughts about one person, this might explain more than you realize. Limerence is an intense psychological state where your brain becomes emotionally obsessed with someone, not because the connection was necessarily healthy, but because it felt emotionally unfinished. Your mind starts chasing emotional certainty. You overanalyze texts, reread moments, search for hidden meanings. You become emotionally addicted to maybe, maybe they still care, maybe they'll come back, maybe this story isn't over. And your brain, it loves unfinished stories. There's actually a psychological phenomenon called the Zygarnik effect. It suggests that our brains remember unfinished emotional experiences more intensely than completed ones, meaning closure matters more than we think. A clean goodbye hurts, but confusion lingers, ghosting lingers, mixed signals linger. The almost relationship, the situationship, the right person, wrong timing story, those become psychological loops because your mind keeps trying to finish what emotionally never made sense. But there's another reason this person keeps replaying in your head: dopamine. And no, not the TikTok version of dopamine, real dopamine, the brain chemical involved in craving, motivation, and reward. Anthropologist Dr. Helen Fisher studied romantic obsession and found that love activates the same brain reward systems connected to addiction, meaning missing someone can literally feel chemical, especially if the relationship was unpredictable. One day, they were affectionate. The next day, they pulled away. One day, they texted constantly. The next, silence. And weirdly enough, that inconsistency can make attachment stronger. Psychologist B.F. Skinner discovered something called intermittent reinforcement. Basically, when rewards become unpredictable, Humans become more obsessed. Think about slot machines. You never know when you'll win. So you keep pulling the lever. Emotionally unavailable people can create the same cycle. You keep hoping for another good moment, another text, another sign they still care. Not because the relationship felt safe, but because uncertainty became addictive. And sometimes it goes deeper than that. Attachment theory, developed by psychologist John Bowlby, suggests that the way we connect in adult relationships often reflects emotional patterns formed earlier in life. If someone made you feel emotionally unstable, hot and cold, wanted but rejected, they may have triggered old emotional wounds you didn't even know existed, which explains something painful. Sometimes you're not only grieving the person, you're grieving the version of yourself that felt alive around them, the hope, the fantasy, the future you imagined. And maybe that's why it hurts so much. Because your brain isn't just losing someone, it's losing possibility. Picture this. A girl sits alone in her apartment in Chicago. She says she's over him, but every time her phone lights up, her heart races, even though it's never him. She checks his story anyway, pretends she doesn't care, but secretly hopes he notices she watched. Not because she's weak, because uncertainty rewired her emotions. Or maybe there's the guy who got ghosted after 6 months of deep conversations. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. So every night he replays everything, wondering where he messed up, what he missed, what he could have fixed. But sometimes there was nothing to fix. The human brain just hates emotional loose ends. And then there's the situationship, the one that almost became real. You weren't official, but somehow the emotional damage feels worse than an actual breakup. Because ambiguity is heavy. No labels, no closure, no answers, just questions. And unanswered questions echo for a long time. But here's something difficult to hear. The person you can't stop thinking about is not always the person meant for you. Sometimes they're the person who exposed something inside you, a loneliness, an insecurity, a hunger to be chosen, a fear of abandonment, a wound you never noticed until they touched it. And maybe that's why your brain keeps bringing them back. Not because they're your soulmate, but because your mind is still trying to understand what broke inside you when they left. And maybe healing doesn't begin when you stop missing them. Maybe healing begins when you stop turning their absence into proof that you weren't enough. Because some people don't leave you with heartbreak. They leave you with questions, and questions can haunt people longer than endings. So if your brain still thinks about one person, maybe you're not crazy. Maybe you're not dramatic. Maybe your mind is just trying to finish a story your heart never got to understand. And if this felt painfully personal, tell me in the comments, what's the hardest part about letting go? And if you want more psychology, that explains the emotions. People usually hide. Stay here. There's a lot your mind has been trying to tell you.